Katoa, no mai hari mai kei tēnei hui. Welcome to this Infrastructure Committee meeting for the 15th of April 2026. I'd just like to welcome you all in and just advise that we are being live streamed, so could just make sure that your phones are on silent. That would be great. We might take a break around 11 if we need to, but for the moment I might just invite Councillor Maxwell, if you're able to do a karakia to open the meeting, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The opening karakia, composed by our own Scotty Morrison o Ngāti Whakaue. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I rau, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai, te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Councillor Maxwell. Thank you very much. First item today is apologies. I do have an apology from Councillor Timara Benfeld just for lateness, but it appears there are no further apologies. So we'll move that late apology be accepted, please. That's Councillor Kaifong and seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, that is carried. Thank you. Item number 3, are there any declarations of interest today? There appear to be none. And I've had no urgent items for the agenda today, but are there any minor matters, councillors? There appear to be no minor matters this morning, thank you. So we'll move on to item 5, which is 5.1, which is the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 18th of March. If there are no matters of correctness, can I have a mover and a seconder that these be confirmed as a true and correct record, please? Thank you, Councillor Wang. Seconded by Councillor Sanford. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried, thank you. And I'll just note that there was an action point requested for a map of sites where there was plastic capture happening to be trialling across the district, and there will be an email that has just landed in your inboxes with that map. So that's the only action point we had from the last meeting. So item 6 is presentations. We have none today, but we do have item number 7.1, which is a petition. And this regards the changes to the weekly waste bin collection, and the petitioner is unfortunately unwell today, but I would like to actually just move that this petition be accepted in the meantime, and that the petitioner is going to be invited to come back at a later date and present if they wish, or perhaps they could even present to a public forum at the approval of the chair. So I would like to ask that the report petition regarding changes to weekly waste bin collection be received, please. Thank you, Councillor Patterson, and seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. And you'll find that in your Stella, councillors. I'd like to move now on to item 8, which is staff reports. 8.1, Capital Delivery Update, Recovered Water Project. Can I have a mover and a seconder that this report be received, please? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded by Mayor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. And just invite Stavros and Ian Gray to step up and overview the report, please.
Good morning all, and thank you for the opportunity again. I am definitely a frequent flyer with the third of my wastewater program today. We've previously done Tarawera and the treatment plant, and now the rec water project, so I do appreciate the opportunity. Just before I get into the slide deck there, I'll just give a really quick overview of where the project has passed through over probably the last 9 months. This is a project which has been on our books for quite a while now, probably since 2014. The project went through a bit of a reset and came across into capital delivery early in 2025. Mid-2025, we took council through a couple of workshops and we locked down a multi-criteria analysis as a framework to assess solutions moving forwards. We went through public submission process to form a couple of members of that working group. We took some nominations from Mana Whenua. We have representative from Te Tātou Arawa on there. We have 3 councillors on there. So formed a working group. That working group has sat since October 25. Apart from a short break over Christmas, I think we're into meeting 6. That working group have been through quite a journey already. We've had specialists in front of them so that they get fully up to speed. We've had specialists in the emerging contaminant space. We've had treatment specialists. We've got a Mataranga Māori specialist sitting in there. We've had presentations from regional council to help that group understand the consenting framework. So that group are well into their work. We chose to take submissions out to the public. So early January, we opened up a portal, gave the public the opportunity to put in solutions and also look at sites. So that was successful. We got 12 solutions or potential solutions offered through that. More recently, the working group has started applying council's MCA or the multi-criteria analysis to those sites and solutions. They've also looked retrospectively back and pulled through all of the prior sites and solutions that were looked at, just so that we canvass just so that we don't waste the work that was done previously. So they've pulled that all into their thinking. So I think that was 20 odd sites and solutions. So they're well advanced through that process. What I would say, we actually have a workshop for this project coming up in May, so that's where we can really delve a bit deeper into the details. So today is really just a quick overview. So that May workshop and then ultimately a council decision against the MCA criteria is coming up very recently. So this is kind of sat quite nicely in that cadence of just starting this discussion. The submission portal is actually open for another short block now. The working group have identified they do have still a little bit more time. They're quite efficient with their process now, where they're looking at sites and applying the MCA criteria. So they've decided to open up the portal just to see if there's any submissions that have been missed that would be of benefit for them to look at. We are on track. The timeframes are really tight, so we are on track to bring the working group's recommendations through in May. So that is a real nice stage gate for us, and a lot more detail will be shared there. The recent pieces of work the working group did circulate around publicly available sites just to look at potential sites available. They're all public sites. We didn't seek permission to go to them. Anyone's available to look at those, so we took the opportunity just to look at some reasonably close sites that occurred 2 weeks ago, and that was really valuable just to get out of sitting around tables and actually look at potential places where the recovered water could go. As I said, that working group are now into the meat of the work, looking or applying the MCA criteria to the solutions which have been offered. So that is underway now. It is a difficult piece of work for the working group. Everyone brings something different to the table, but they are well advanced, taking the 20 odd and trying to narrow that down so that there's a smaller number for council to look at and ultimately approve in that June pathway. That's probably about it on that slide. I will jump through the last point on the right there, talks to consenting.
Just very briefly to reinforce a couple of key points. There are a couple of milestones that elected members need to be continuously aware of. The upgrade of the treatment plan is due to be completed in September this year. Therefore, by September, we will have a wastewater treatment plan that, will produce a treatment process that surpasses the current treatment plant processes, and the effluent the recovered water coming out of the treatment process will be expected to meet all the national performance environmental standards, for that process. The important thing for elected members to be aware of in terms of our timeframes and timetables is that by June this year, we will be coming to you with a recommendation to progress with a number of shortlisted options into stage 2, which means we will apply a more detailed multi-criteria assessment for them. And the urgency of that is that by December this year, the working group will have to arrive at a recommendation to the Council. So the Council can receive the recommendation and include those recommendations, perhaps another couple of options, into the pending long-term plan that will start in early 2027. So by the time you consider your various elements of your long-term plan, obviously that will be a significant element to allow a public consultation and input into the recommended solution, and obviously to allow the progression towards a consenting process, and obviously from there on, whatever legislative and regulatory barriers or milestones need to achieve. So time frame is becoming a little bit constrained between now and December, and therefore in June we do hope to have come back to you with 2 or 3 or 4 options to go into the more invasive and detailed assessment. Thank you.
Stavros has stolen my thunder, which is good, and I can just add a little bit on to the end of it, which really just talks to the slightly wider program and a little bit of the consenting pathway. So the goalpost moved a touch on us late last year, early this year, and the consenting pathway for us is really quite tight. And it actually aligns our extension to the current consent we will need to have in by mid next year, which will give an extension from December 27 to December 2030. So by December 2030, we need to be operative, constructed, and that kind of sets our full pathway backwards, which actually is what is presented in the program up there, which has been in place for about 9 months, but it does set a number of gateway and approval processes for council as we step through that. So that is extremely briefly the consenting pathway and the program ahead. On the right is more, and this is how all the capital projects should present. I show a pie graph so you can see I did talk to the project starting in 2014. We now know we need to be closed out end of 2030. The pie graph really just shows we're at the start of our reset. There is a lot of work to do, but we've actually covered quite a bit of distance already. Pie graph like that's way easier once we get into construction, and I can start to talk to progress against more of a defined program and budget. Obviously, we're at the very start of our budget because we're not into the meat of construction. So I will probably leave it there and open for questions.
Thank you, Ian and Stavros. We'll start with Councillor Pedersen. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you, Ian and Stavros. Just with regards to the number of actual submissions, so you say there were 12 solutions. How many submissions in total?
Thank you. Through the Chair. There were 12 submissions, so we tried to be quite prescriptive with the portal as to everything that we wanted them to submit on to help our working group assess against the MCA criteria. There was a real mix of what those looked like, but there were 12 submissions. Some of them were nice and concise and gave us something to work with. Some of them were just very, they just said what they didn't want. So there was a whole range. And again, this will be really fleshed out in May when we'll present everything. So the working group at the moment are just pulling all that together. So there were 12. The portal is open again, and I understand a number of or more submissions have recently been submitted. So that will all be rolled together for the report in May, or for the workshop in May.
Subsequent question. So how is that being promoted? that the portal is open again?
I wish Dylan was here to answer. Just through our normal social media, so through social media, through Council's website, through our working group, we've put it to our working group to reach out into their networks. So we've attempted to go as wide as possible, as quick as possible.
Okay.
We also have communicated directly through a whole range of direct communication contact points through the iwi leadership in groups, Hapu and iwi, to let them know that, the portal is open until the 26th of April with an effort to actually solicit as much additional proposals as it could.
Excellent. Thank you for confirming that. And just one last point of clarification. From the Te Arawa 2050 Vision Committee meeting last week, there was a statement in there about the RLC work plan, and in there it talked about the recovered water program, and the statement was, this will be a decision for the next 35 years at least. So am I to read from that decision that whatever is decided by this council going forward will be locked in for the next 35 years with no option to update, change, modify?
I think the statement from the committee, you heard at the committee, it refers to the duration of the resource consent for the discharge point. I think the legislation says that once you meet certain parameters and requirements, a 35-year resource consent is appropriate, for that element. I think what we need to distinguish two different things. That is a consent to discharge a particular point or a particular methodology. We continue to say to everyone who's in touch with us that the treatment plant at the moment is designed to the latest limits of current technology. However, 35 years is a long time, and obviously there's got additional, viable options to continue to enhance the treatment process to make it, even more efficient, more effective. I think the council will maintain an open mind, or obvious to that aspect. I think the commentary related mainly to the discharge consent duration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. And just a comment from the CE before we move to Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just if I can reinforce perhaps what that comment might have been alluding to, because I presented something similar to the Te Tato board before that committee meeting. The legislative framework put into place by this government is very much about long-term solutions, and it removes a lot of the avenues for temporary or short-term solutions that exist under the RMA. And so I think that we're being encouraged strongly and being guided through the change in legislation to make these decisions once and make them in an enduring manner. And that's why resource consents under the new system won't be for, there won't be bridging consents, temporary consents, short-term consents. None of that is an option. And what we've got is 35-year consents to represent that these are long-term decisions and are made and settled. So I guess hopefully that provides a bit more.
So just to clarify, if at some point in the future this council decided to change that consent, would we legally be able to do so?
My understanding is council would be able to apply for a different consent. I don't know whether the process at the time would then query you as to why you want to change when you've been given a 35-year consent. But at that point, I'm starting to speculate. We haven't seen the drafting of the scenarios that would describe someone with a valid consent wanting to apply for yet another one. So I can't advise on that, but certainly the policy direction and legislative direction is once you've decided it, it stays settled.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena Kōrua. I'm pleased to hear that the working group has had a wide panel of experts, I suppose you could say, presenting to them, which is great for their knowledge about the issues, etc. So that means that the working group then there shouldn't be any surprises a bit further down the track. They're all being presented with the same information. They have an opportunity to ask the experts questions and then come back to you two as well. And, just so that everybody at the end of the day will be constructive in getting to the solutions that will help our community.
Thank you, Councillor Kawatai. Yes, you're absolutely correct. The composition of the working group and the information they receive, the inquiries they make, is designed to provide opportunities for people to question and interrogate, technical and legal and I suppose regulatory options, for them to be comfortable that when they make a final recommendation to you close to December, this year, they can with certainty say they have explored and they have been informed about the options and all the technical requirements of this process.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following on from Councillor Okawatate's question, how many councillors are serving on this committee?
2.
Right.
So, and here we
so the rest of the councillors haven't. Sorry.
3. Sorry.
2 councillors, 1 mayor.
Yeah, that's what I said. 2 councillors and the worship the mayor.
So the rest of us don't have the same opportunity to get the inside run on what's happening on this council, on this committee then?
Well, remember that I think that is a working party, that the working group that will be reporting to you. You are the final decision makers. And obviously through this forum of us presenting progress today, then updates on the program, that's another opportunity to get information you may require, Councillor Lee.
So an answer to my question, no. We don't have the same opportunity.
Well, that's your interpretation, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the update. Just a couple of questions, if I may. I'd heard some concerns sort of in the community grapevine around people having ideas that they wanted to submit but not being aware of what had been submitted. And I was just, wondering, because they don't want to duplicate the process and propose something that's already proposed. And I was just wondering from your point of view, having seen the submissions, if you're happy with the range of options that have been put forward?
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Firstly, all submissions and the minutes and the notes of the working group are posted online for us, so people can have a look at them and say submission received, description of the proposal, and so on. So they have access to that information available to them.
Okay, that's good. I guess that comes back to another point just around communication on this, because I think moving forward it's going to be key to make sure that the community is part of this journey. My second question was, again, this comes from the community, was around the multi-criteria analysis that the working group is applying. Just so I'm clear on what that is that the one with where the analysis of the weighting to community is 10%, the weighting to iwi is 10%, and just again relaying a concern that was given to me was that there are some parts of the community that think the weighting for community and iwi is too small in that analysis, and so I just wanted to relay that as a concern.
I think we are aware of that. Just to remind everyone that the initial terms of reference of the working party, the working group, and the multi-criteria framework was agreed by the council. The working group convened and then reviewed the terms of reference and the multi-criteria, and another adjustment and fine-tuning of those came back to the council for adopting again. So that's the framework we're working on at the moment.
Thank you. Further question from Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from Councillor Sanford's question, these percentage ratings, whatever they're called, they're not actually binding on the current council when we do make a decision further this year, are we? Is it?
Councillor Lee, I might, do you mind? I might answer that. Stavros, is to say is those weightings as part of that process were adopted by council to guide you in your decision making. Ultimately, council can choose to make decisions on whatever basis it wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions? No, in that case, thank you very much, gentlemen, for answering the questions and presenting today. Just a note that the workshop for councillors is on the 25th of May, and then the paper comes to the June council meeting at this stage on the 24th of June. So we'll now move on to the Water Services Delivery Plan implementation. That's item 8.2 on page 17 of your agendas. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the Water Services Delivery Report be received, or presentation be received? Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. And Councillor Wing, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Craig Tiriana and Stavros again. Thank you, gentlemen.
Tēnā tātou, ko Craig Tiriana Takaringoa. I am Craig Tiriana and I am the Program Manager, Local Waters Done Well. And a bit like Ian, thank you very much for the time to update you this morning on where we're at with this program. Many of you will recall that the Water Service Delivery Plan was a direct response to some of the legislative changes when the new government came in. And we had, prior to that, a thing called Three Waters, which was floating around, and it was a direct change of that program. So your Water Service Delivery Plan, which was adopted by the previous council, outlaid a way forward for this council, and there was a decision made late in that previous triennium that the preferred option of Rotorua Lakes Council was to pursue a multi-council controlled CCO and water services delivery, and to look at an investigation into that. And then if in the meantime, because the legislation states that changes had to happen pretty urgently, in the meantime was to continue with water services delivery in-house, but the in-house is subject to a whole lot of, I suppose, new legislation and requirements through Commerce Commissions, taumata arawai that weren't existing previously. And so even in our internal business unit, we have to do some changes. So this presentation today is a little bit of pulling some threads together for you so you can see that there's not only the, I suppose, the CCO work that you've been aware from some a previous workshop, but also there's a couple of other things working in parallel which will come back together to support your decision making during this period. And a little bit of, I think I've probably covered all the background, but just for, that's that high arching timeline of where we are now. We're in this October to October 26, where we're working in-house, but we're also underway with an investigation. In the highlight slide which comes up, which we're also having to report to the Department of Internal Affairs on, we've created the water service, the water working group, which was in our plan, and we're now signed a heads of agreement with Kawerau, Apotiki and Whakatane councils to progress this work. So there's the membership is the mayor of each authority plus two members of each council. So we have Mayor Tapsell, Councillor Barker and Councillor Sanford are on that working group. The next meeting of that is here in Rotorua next week, but we've done a full cycle since the inaugural meeting, which was late last year. So the work program is really starting to gather some momentum there. That sort of signals a little bit of what's happened. The group's established. These are the key milestones that we have to report to DIA that shows we're making progress. When DIA accepted our water service delivery plan last year, there was two things they really focused on in our acceptance letter. One, that we were going to do this investigation into a multi-council CCO, and that was the preferred option of the council. And the second thing was that they were going to work with these other councils in regard to that. Or actually, and the third thing is that our capital program, which is very front-loaded in the waters area, continues to deliver as it's in the plan. So those are a couple of, or three things that are very crucial for us to keep continuing on. These are the three pieces of work. The IBU, or the in-house business unit, that has to be the term is ring-fenced, and I think many of you will understand what that is. It's that it exists on its own and it is self-sufficient, and it has all the ins and outs of water, and it can be planned and managed separately from other council business. As it is now, that control still remains in the organisation. It's still guided by all of our current planning and strategy documents. The investigation, which is underway now into the multi-council CCO, that's the work we're doing in the water group. And the new one on the schedule there, which we've just added, we've got to have a water strategy that overarches all of this work, and that has to be part of, most likely, the document will go to public consultation in the LTP process next year to have that signed off. The draft should be before the end of this year. I think the timing's around November for you to look at that. And the water service strategy document, there's another slide to come, but we'll give a bit more detail on that. So those are the three pieces of work that are now operating in under Stavros's area. It does incorporate a lot of staff across these, though, particularly the ring fencing and strategy work. You obviously have a lot of financial input into the planning and what we currently have going on. This is a little bit on the in-house business unit, which we're trying to understand, is the financial systems, the separate financials that will have to be reported on. We've had a request around the financial disclosures for this year, which needs to be done by the end of July. Internally, we're doing a operational stock take. I mean, council always works out overheads, and there's a formula for that, but we're trying to make sure that we really understand what goes into our in-house delivery, what are the costs of that, what are the resourcing, and making sure that once it's ring-fenced out, we've got a really good understanding of that, but also that it doesn't shortchange council, or it doesn't shortchange the ring-fencing. So those are really crucial things to get right. And then by next July, it has to be operating in terms of the legislation. So it has to be financially secure and reporting and operating in terms of the legislation. So that's the timeline on that piece of work. The investigation, many of you will know a little bit more about this, but this is the first time we've been able to talk publicly in a committee meeting about the progress on this since the decision making was made by council. I think the water service delivery plan and the other documents would have come in front of the previous councils for decisions. So there's a few slides here that you would have seen before, just a little bit around some, and there's a little bit about the detail that the working group is now working on. So as I said, the four parties are there. We're working through the program now. Ultimately, when you make a decision, you'll have to determine what sort of consultations needed when we get to that point later in this year. And we've continued at Rotorua Lakes Council here, we've continued in our communication channels across this topic, even post or even prior to your decisions last year when the consultation would have happened as a council. Our communication channels have stayed open and have kept building the information that's there, particularly on the website, around what is happening under this piece of work. And also there's reports up there, I think on a monthly basis, of what the working group's up to, and we are sharing those minutes with you as we go through the program as well. It's a little bit hard to see, but we are down in the quarter one, quarter two. We're into that piece of work there with the studies being looked at now, and that's an investigation, obviously, the work that will all come forward to help you make your decision, and that's based on the criteria that the working group are working to and the work plan on there. The report will come through as the working group attacks certain things every month, which will create, for a better word, chapters of the report, and they will show you the things that have been highlighted, I think, in previous work as to what you would need to make decisions on the right pathway into the future.
Sorry, Craig, before you move on past the slide, and just similar to the previous presentation, I'd like to just highlight how this interacts with your long-term plan decision-making. If you look at that, the end of the grey bar that says community engagement, then you go a little bit further to the right, you see consultation feedback, and then the next diamond is the elected member decision on the water organisation. Effectively, that is at the very start of 2027. And the reason for that is whatever decision you make about your water organisation needs to be reflected in the long-term plan. We can't do those two bits of work in parallel because the long-term plan needs to reflect either water's in or water's out after that first year. So it's vital that this decision comes before the preparation of the consultation documents for the long-term plan. Thank you.
This gives a little bit of detail to those chapters I mentioned and the subjects that have been talked about to create that work as to what you would need to know as elected members to help you inform your decision making. So the working group at the moment I think from the workshop we had recently, we had some, the draft strategic case and high level option assessments were starting to emerge. The strategic objectives and the criteria were looked at across the different councils and have sort of been merged as one. We're now in a point where the financial information that you will get later in the year is being pulled together with the assessment of each council alongside that. And across the next couple of months, we'll be looking at things like the representation ownership discussions, direction governance, representation pricing, the draft implementation plan, and that's always, there'll be one created, but that's still subject to whatever decision is made. And then the final report will be drafted in front of you, and then we'll create whatever consultation materials need to support that at that point. And that's just a little bit of detail that shows how the working group actually looks at these things, and that complements what you receive in your minute packs as we get them back from the host councils. At this stage, those are the three options that everyone is looking at in this study, and the work in the study, as was asked for by the council, brings together some of the learnings that have happened elsewhere. So there's a particular focus on what's happened in rural Victoria, where they went through some reforms a couple of years back, and they have similar scales and network separation like we do here in New Zealand, so it's quite relevant in terms of getting some good data and direction, as well as what's happening in some of our neighbouring councils and water progress. Obviously there's the Waikato waters across from us into the south, Matamatapiako and down to Taupō, and then you've got ELY happening between Hamilton Council and Waikato District Council, and then we've obviously got the new announcement in the last few weeks where Tauranga and Western Bay and perhaps Thames Coromandel will still come into that equation, but they're all working on the creation of an entity right now, so they've all made the decision-making process and they're now into the how do we build one, and they're at different levels of that. But some of their learning will obviously be available to us, even though that they're not a whole lot of a long way in front of us, but there may be things of value for you. In those options, I think they're... Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah. I think the key is there's the internal business unit, which is our fallback from the decision. The second option there is the preferred option that was indicated from the previous decision with the actual asset owning part of it. The third option is still a water services organisation, but that just talks about service delivery only, so your assets would remain in council as opposed to out of council, and that there's some different benefits into those descriptions there. These were those strategic objectives which I talked about briefly before. they're largely what the legislation drives. They've just been packaged to what people see as the objectives to deliver on. I don't think anything there would surprise you, but they have been chewed over in workshops by each council and were part of several councils' water service delivery plan. In our group, we didn't get that far, but it was stated in our water service delivery plan that Rotorua would have some strategic objectives as well. That gives a little bit of detail what's behind them, which is probably a good reference point for anyone to further look into them. I won't read it, it's a pretty detailed slide, but I think it provides some background for you if you need it. Same there. There was, at the last working group meeting, there was a little bit of discussion around their strategic objectives, their responsibilities to Hapui and Iwi are met. Wasn't necessarily the sentiment that some of the working group members thought was right in those words. So there was an attempt at some wordsmithing, but I haven't seen the final result, so those words may change a little bit. I think it's just a matter of, and some of the members might be able to elaborate some on that, but it was a little bit of a discussion, just in case some words change as this goes along. I think the intent's right. There was just some debate around whether responsibilities was an appropriate word. The water services strategy will become our guiding document for waters management into the future, whether it's the CCO or in-house. It's very simply, it'll be the LTP and the strategy document that guides investment, planning and decision making long term. And it's made up by all those documents that are there now, infrastructure strategies and so forth, and how you pull the waters out of there, the various AMPs or asset management plans, strategic management plans that are held there, as well as all the legislative requirements that go into making sure we're compliant under the Act. As I said a little bit earlier, we expect the draft strategy for you for consideration in November. And the consultation around that document would happen alongside the LTP in early 2027. Yep. So that's broadly an update of the work that's coordinating with our water service delivery plan. The key date for us right now is we've got obviously another working group meeting, and then we have to report by the end of this month to DIA on our progress. It was very clear in our letter from, on behalf of the Secretary for Local Government through DIA, that they were really mindful that what we were doing and that the timeline associated with it, and they would be monitoring both the timeline and our capital program delivery. So those are the things that we'll be emphasising in our reporting back to them about where we're at with all of those things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Just very quickly, from our perspective as an infrastructure group, obviously while we're working with our regional colleagues and partners and give effect to the investigation for the possible regional water services in CCO, we do continue to take very seriously the fact that we have direct responsibilities to our local community in terms of providing our three water services at the level of that they are safe and they're reliable, and obviously of managing our assets so they remain in a stable condition. So I think for elected members need to be assured that while we're doing all this extra work to explore these possibilities, none of us is losing focus onto what we need to do to maintain our current infrastructure services to the level that you have stipulated your long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros, and thank you, Craig, for the presentation. Are there any questions, councillors? That's Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Rokara-Tate, and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Craig and Stavros again. Just with regards to page 10 of the slideshow, 3 options were listed. Is equal effort being put into the investigation of those 3 options, or just option 2?
The short answer is equal, and these will be the options that will be assessed. I suppose the working group at some point might zero in more on one or the other. I think there was some talk about 3 not being as desirable, but I don't think there's any that hasn't been removed at this stage yet, but that's something that still needs to be discussed. Yeah.
Okay. Secondary question, supplementary. So who decides if it's desirable?
I think ultimately that will come in your final report as to what the options are in front of you. So the work will keep continuing and there'll be a pathway towards how you determine those.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We now move on to Councillor Rotorua Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a question that I'd like to ask, and it might be to Andrew, because you mentioned that when we go out to consult on the LTP, we would then have to indicate which option we're going with. However, when we do go out, we won't be in a position to we won't have all the information to know which option is the preferred option. And I'm particularly looking at the WSCO, because the investigation into that is still continuing into basically July, well, possibly winding up in July 28, earlier. But anyway, I'm just concerned about the LTP, really. Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder if we could go back to that slide, because it is a really good question to understand the sequence. Yeah. Do you want to go back to that? Yeah. So I think if you look at the grey box that says final report, which ends sometime, I guess, partway through Q3 this year, which is the quarter that's July, August, September. So sometime across those 3 months, and actually at the early end of that, there would be the final report to you, to Council, on the assessment. You would then, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Craig, you would then make a decision, put together that iwi engagement piece. We would put together a community engagement piece that would go out. We would have responses from both of those before the end of this year in order for you to make that decision very early next year. Craig, do you want to, have I got that right?
That consultation should come together in the last quarter of this year, where you actually will get to make a decision then as to what your preferred option would be. So, and then that's the consultation comes together, and I think that's scheduled right now for in that February period. You'd make the decision, but we will have to have we'll have an idea of a preferred option and what that looks like before then for the bulk of the work towards the LTP, and also the other strategy documents to support it. You will have a workshop to consider what goes out for consultation, and if you've, I suppose I need to re-emphasise, the previous council has made a decision that the preferred option is a water service entity, a multi-council one, with a backup being in-house. So that's the decisions that was made in 2025. What this work does is allowed some greater depth of testing those options, and then the assessment will come back to councillors where it will be, what does a multi-council option look like? Is it an asset transferred one, or is it one that's service only? And then if that's not desirable, then it would be the in-house model, which was the backup that the council chose. So that would be the decision paths at that point. And that's all designed to happen by February, very much next year. So it will be before the LTP goes out. So the LTP is slightly behind this. It is a bit of a jumble in the timeline, because that's just the way the legislation points us, because of the dates to get things done by. Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. I just wondered if I could just ask another, it's not a supplementary, it's just a concern, because we've got 3 other councils that we're working with. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we want a solution. We want something that's going to be workable for us. And so I just wouldn't like to think that our priorities might get subsumed by having to now work constructively with other councils. So that's just a point that I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and it's valid. We'll move on now to Councillor Lee, then Maxwell, and then Brown. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just focusing on responsibilities to Hapu and iwi, making sure those responsibilities are met. Which Hapu and iwi are you engaging with?
I think through you, Madam Chair, as Craig said, the working group had some discussions about the expression of that, those terms of responsibility, but it's undoubted that we do have land ownership agreements, easement agreements, relationship protocols, joint resource consents, understands with many iwi and hapu in our district, and every council has the same thing. And a lot of those, relationships are with the Rotorua Lakes Council. So obviously any new entity, any new structure will have to put some kind of safeguards around those relationships, so they don't get diluted into a new structure that would no longer recognize the relationship between an individual council and the individual hapu.
Are you able to provide a list? Because I'm assuming, my question was, which hapu and iwi are you engaging with?
Paul can sort of elaborate a bit.
Through you, Chair, Councillor Lee, we've got an engagement plan that Craig and Michelle are working on. We will engage with all 35 settlement entities, because the way the legislation is structured under government, that settlement was done with the government. That filters down to local government, and therefore we have obligations under settlement entities. Second part of that is that we've got a Local Government Act, which says that we will provide for and enable participation in decision making. So we will exercise that responsibility. That's clearly outlined, and I know that you've been exposed to that in the training that we've had. And then we will, as Stavros has alluded to, we will go through the list of impacted and affected landowners and hapu that are impacted and affected by those relationship protocols and those where they supply water to the community.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, that's great. Can I be provided with a list or a copy of this plan? Has this engagement happened as yet, or is that to happen in the future?
That engagement, through you, Madam Chair, that engagement is kicking off shortly, but it's an ongoing. We communicate to, I think Craig does a monthly update to all of our entities. That's part of our regular format regarding just water topics, because we've got a lot of infrastructure going on and projects going on, so they get a water update. And you can absolutely see the list anytime. We can provide that to you.
Perhaps the engagement plan could be provided for the next report or something like that.
We can take that as an action point.
Thank you.
Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you. Just some feedback being on the working group. Just as we are today, it's anticipated that any future work is also brought back on a regular basis to provide updates to all of the council, reiterating that final decision making at the end of it comes here. Whether or not it's appropriate to share that detail before we've even had the action underway, I'm not sure. So as an example, iwi engagement is set to start soon, then wider community engagement. At the moment, the working group's just working through a communications plan on that, so we can be really clear with our community what we're going to do, and just a reminder that it's very early stages at this time in the working group process.
Thank you, Mayor Texel, for that context. So in time, we'll provide that plan for you. So thank you. That's an action point to take away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we've got Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll try and ask a positive partai on iwi and hapu, page 29. Craig, for me personally, before asking my partai, very pleased with your involvement. with this important project, especially with all the experience you've had with in this field. For me personally, I'm aware that Ngāti Rangiwewehi has strong protocol arrangements with our own council here. And I'd just like if you could, you or even Stavros and even Paula can just elaborate a little bit more about the positive side of working with our people, even though I know we're working with other councils, but I'm sure they'll have similar protocols themselves. So can you just elaborate a bit more?
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. I'll just very briefly, talk to the tangible operational benefits we get, from all relationships. I think I will leave it. Every individual person might have their particular views about those relationships, but from the council as an organisation, if you recall it with, and again I wasn't here, but I understand the background to that. Somewhere back in 2010, the Environment Code instructed council to vacate the Taniwha Springs, to hand over the Taniwha Springs back to Ngāti Rangiwewehi. The alternative to that, was for the council to go and explore a different water source, and there was valued at that point in time to be in the tens of millions of dollars. The relationship with Ngāti Rangiwewehi developed into a joint operational agreement and a joint resource consent, which allows the council to continue to secure water from that water source for the next 35 years. And obviously, as part of that, we have a joint responsibility to give effect to the resource consent conditions of that. Building onto that, we are currently working on Ngāti Rangiwewehi to renew and refresh our resource consent for the water source of Rewa. And again, if we couldn't have that agreement to jointly work onto that, obviously that would force the council to look for alternatives. And I've made a presentation to this council some time ago which says, well, yes, there's plenty of water in the region. We can extract water from other sources, but it's going to cost tens of millions of dollars. And therefore, the more pragmatic approach and operational efficient approach is to continue to secure water sources from those, from those areas. So just some examples of that. So as I said, I will leave it to each individual of you to think of the relationship, but I'm looking at it purely from the operational perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. We'll now move on to Councillor Brown and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do our current KPIs around water align with the strategic objectives set out by central government for a CCO?
The KPIs we've got in our three waters are really dictated or guided by legislation, by the current statute. Obviously, as we are aware, we think that the strategic direction set by these legal reforms are not inconsistent with these KPIs. However, you will find over the next few years that, in terms of Tamata ROI and their ongoing assessment of the performance of water services, you might find that some of these KPIs will continue to be reviewed and refreshed and updated. But at the moment, all our KPIs in terms of the drinking water standards and the management of containment of wastewater, the management and containment of stormwater and so on, are consistent with the strategic directions. You will find perhaps some adjustments to it going forward in the future, but do not expect to see significant changes to it.
Thank you. And we are currently achieving all the KPIs across the board?
Well, for the last 7-8 years since we adopted our infrastructure strategy in 2018, we're meeting our drinking water standards, and consistently our KPIs consistently are in the green zone.
Right. So one of the objectives here is that the services are efficient. My view currently is that we're doing a pretty good job in-house. And I take on board ring fencing will give us a good understanding of exactly where we sit with three waters. There's some risk that comes with these changes. How does the working group assess the risks against improved efficiencies. Is that something we're looking at?
Well, I think and again, Andrew, you may want to, as part of the NSCs, participate into that. I think the baseline for assessing the alternative option of forming a regional CCO is that services provided to the communities will be equal or better to the current services. So in asking the question, will a transition to a, let's say, hypothetical, regional CCO have the potential to impact on our ability to continue to stay in the green zone? Well, I think our job is to make sure that it doesn't happen. I note your concern, obviously, that I interpret your concern is that any transition usually involves disruption and anomalies and disturbance. And there's a risk. Therefore, we have to make sure we don't compromise potential improvements by disturbing what we have as a good baseline at this point in time.
If I can add that, as Stavros has rightly said, over the last number of years we're very much in the green. That's challenging. As usual, we're under all sorts of pressures, as you know. I might remind councillors, and again before my time, one of the reasons council signed a long-term agreement with Trilogy was to address some risks we had that we were not able to mitigate ourselves, such as workforce attraction and capital investment. So having done that, we've addressed those issues. That's come at a cost, and there is an opportunity through this process to look at whether that is the most efficient way to address those challenges we faced, or going forward there are better ways to address those challenges. The second thing I'd say is we don't operate in a vacuum. So we operate in a competitive environment with a lot of other providers. And as the landscape around us changes, our advice is that we need as a council to consider what's our response strategy to those changes. In the past, there have been 67 providers of water services. At the moment, it looks like it's 42. That might consolidate further in the future, and then our relative ability to hire, to recruit, to bargain with contractors, all of that changes over time. So we're just mindful that this decision is not about the next potentially 1, 2 or 5 years, but takes a much longer horizon. But we'll bring all of those considerations to you to consider when you make your decision.
Yeah, I'd like to see understanding the risks, how they're mitigated, and what the efficiencies that will be gained when we take on additional risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just seeking a little further clarification following on from my last question and looking at the chart that's up on the up on display at present. So we see the engagement plan there in Q1, which Paul referred to. I see iwi engagement follows on in Q2. There's a final report that happens, and on that chart it looks like there's a tiny bit of overlap with community engagement. So first thing we see, there's a separate engagement for iwi from the community engagement. The iwi engagement precedes the final report, so does that mean that the iwi engagement is like pre-consultation?
I'll leave that to Paul. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Lee, I think, and I'm confident that you have a thorough understanding of the landscape that we operate in Rotorua with 35 settlement entities, 26 protocols. We don't have the resource, and nor do iwi and hapu have the ability to digest a scale of engagement that's required through their treaty settlement obligations as well as their protocol arrangements that aligns with the community. I would need a significant team. You would have to resource iwi and hapu up to be able to digest that in order for them to participate in the conversations that need to occur. So the reason why iwi engagement starts so early is because we're trying to work in with our heavy workload, and I use a description often with my colleagues. Sometimes council and government can generate a face over the hydrant approach to expecting both community and iwi and hapu to digest the rhythms and tempos of local and central government. So yes, we start early, it's timely, and even then it's still rushed. And then somewhere in the mix of that, we have to do community engagement as directed by this chamber here too. So that's the reason why it may look like pre-engagement, but it's accepting and acknowledging that early conversations are way better and easier than doing it rushed and last minute.
So is it correct to say that the iwi engagement will have the opportunity of contributing to the final report, whereas community engagement will not?
I don't think that's a correct assumption, but I will pass over to the CE for some comments. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, no, that's not the correct interpretation of what you're seeing here. If you can see that the final report follows on from the detailed technical assessment, which is largely done by an independent party, a consultancy that was jointly engaged by the four councils, and they're going to be doing a lot of technical analysis rather than considering the views of the community. So that final report will be a technical report. It's up to then councils to consider the consultation feedback from the public and the iwi engagement feedback from iwi partners and the technical assessment report together with our advice, which will be different in each of the four councils potentially, and then you make a decision on that basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a further question from Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your indulgence. This one is probably directed at the CE. Just hearing what you were answering the question from Councillor Brown. This decision, local water done well, is one of central government's major reforms. The local government reform, should we be taking these two separately? Because one may impact the other depending on what path we choose as a council for our future. Having a decision made on this, which is significant, a significant amount of our revenue, etc., is potentially tied up into this. I'm concerned that this may be taken separately when in fact we should be looking at the overall future for this council rather than just focusing on local water done well. Should we be looking at the whole picture?
Maybe I'll, thank you to you, Madam Chair. Maybe I'll try and give you what I've heard from DIA, and maybe others have more to add to this as well. None of the reforms that have come after the local water done well legislative change are inconsistent with this. So if I give you an example of rates capping, they're very clear to exclude water charges from there. The legislation around local water done well also excludes water services from being audited through a standard long-term plan process because they'll be audited through the Commerce Commission. It's a different process. The Systems Improvement Bill also indicates a separation of water and other functions of council. And the latest policy announcement, which, just to be clear, is a draft policy announcement. We don't even have the final policy announcement on the simplifying local government, is quite clear in the distinction between service delivery and governance changes. So that anticipates a range of different delivery options for services within whatever changes arise out of the governance option. So to answer the question from a central government legislation context, is it appropriate to look at them separately? I believe so. That's the way central government are drafting their legislative changes. Is it a good idea from a resource and a bandwidth perspective? It's probably not, but we still have to do it.
Right. That's where I was leading, is that it seems like while their intention is to cut down on duplication and make things more efficient, it seems to me like we're creating more and more entities for doing things that we're already doing. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Peterson. Are there any further questions? Thank you, councillors. Thank you very much, Craig and Stavros, for the presentation and the answers of questions. The working group is trying to formulate a process to generate as richer information for this council as possible on all the options, so that when you come to decision making, then you'll have the best information available to be able to make a really strong decision. So we'll continue that work with our meeting next week. We'll now move on to item 8.3, which is emergency works at Wahio Drive, page 34 on your agendas. Can I have a mover and a seconder that report be received? Thank you, Councillor Wang. Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Stavros to take the seat again and overview the report, please. And there is a presentation in your agenda, councillors, with the background on this piece of work, as well as a report for you for background information. I'll hand it over to you, Stavros.
My apologies, Madam Chair. I thought we were at the latest session. Okay. Through you, Madam Chair, I think the report is quite, self-explanatory. I do hope. Back in August last year, geothermal activity within the Whakarewa village generated a tomo or a sinkhole. As you can see it, that's the picture you see in front of you there. Now, cognizant of the incident we had in July 2022, if you recall, when two Australian tourists, were severely injured by a similar incident there. The village management and council reacted very quickly to isolate, the area there and take some precautionary measures until we investigate, the root causes of the event. Subsequent to that, obviously, had to make some decisions as to what would have been in September 2025, December, and we actually undertook a lot of investigation works to see, well, this happened a couple of years ago. We fixed it. We thought we fixed it. The geothermal activity continued to be evolving and create similar hazards and risks for the people. We discussed with the village management an appropriate process, and all of them concurred that it was important to try to address it from the long-term perspective. And because the geothermal activity under this particular area appears to be alive and evolving all the time, we have arrived at the conclusion that maintaining a pavement surface that relies on the integrity of the base underneath it, which is subject to geothermal activity, is not a viable option. And after December this year, we embarked into a process where we've looked into eliminating, as far as possible, the unpredictability of the geothermal impacts onto that pavement. And we went to do what we call a rigid pavement design, which is basically a large concrete slab that will be bridging the two sides of that section. So if the geothermal activity creates cavities underneath that, the rigid slab is self-supported. It does not create a new cavity and puts people and materials at risk. So we have discussed that with the village management, and we think that is the best, long-term viable option for that. It took us some time to get to that level. Having said that, obviously we had to also secure the financial elements of that activity, and we had to seek as financial assistance from the NZTA, which eventually provided, recently confirmation that it will support it by 57% of the gross cost of the remedial works. We also arrived at a view with the village management on the timing for these works, to be done before the tourist season, and therefore we've got in front of you here a recommendation to note that there is a solution, has been decided. NZTA has provided assurance that they give the 57% funding agreement. However, our internal transport activity has no longer funds available to it in this financial year. We've used the last one available scrapes of financial resources we had to rectify the failure of the road on Mangamingi, which is about $1 million worth of repair works, and therefore we seek your authorization to the Chief Executive to exercise his delegated authority and allocate somewhere between $450,000 and $600,000 of local capital funds, to effect this, these repairs. So I will take any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stavros. I'll hand over to councillors. Questions from Councillor Wing and Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Thanks, Stavros, for the presentation and the report. I'm supportive of this and just had a question, I guess, around what you just mentioned around Mangamingi Road and the related weather damage with that. That resulted in us, having exhausted that financial capacity for this project. So the NZTA co-funding of the 57% for those, I guess, emergency works, that event wasn't able to be covered because you said that it was by a case basis.
No, they do. NZTA will co-fund Mangamingi by 57% too. But before we undertake any remedial works, we always need to get authorization from NZTA. So we can't commit our local funds until we get authorization from them that they will fund their funding assistance rate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So potentially we can come out of this relatively.
If I can, through you, Madam Chair, just to be clear, both of these works have received the co-funding from NZTA.
Yeah.
Once that's considered, we still have no budget left to do this work, and that's why we're coming here for Council's decision on unbudgeted expense.
Okay, cool. And thanks for that clarification. And just the other question was just I noted in the presentation that there was the exposed water main as well, and whether or not that would cause potential other issues down the track with not just roading but also water delivery issues.
I think, yes, we have to, as part and parcel of the remedial design work, we are actually taking steps to, to protect those, sewage and water supply lines at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Maxwell, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll get in before Councillor Lee asks a third question about iwi. For me, Wahio Drive out there is more than a public road. It is actually pai tapu there in the village. It is also a tourism path, and there was a tourist who fell into that tautau at the time, and I remember when the case came up, and I think they went to sue council, but we were cleared of that pleasingly. Personally, I'm just disappointed that NZTA didn't fund all of it. But nor that I support what the recommendation that is here. I support the recommendations that are fully there. But yeah, it is more than a public road. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell.
I'm disappointed too, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just carrying on from Councillor Maxwell's comments in Patai. Just for the benefit of people who are listening, and to be absolutely clear, this is a public road, correct? So it is our responsibility to deal with it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Brown and Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is slightly out of context, but this is a residential area. Has anyone taken a step back and asked the question whether natural hazards that are developing down there is an appropriate place for people to live? Look, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I just thinking about the residents.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think I personally have raised some concern about the geothermal activity in the area, not just on public assets, on physical assets, but also potentially on people who live there. So Backland Regional Council and I have some conversations about it. However, at the end of the day, that is a historical Maori village. The people there, they consider it as as a place of residence. And they assured us also they are fully aware of the potential risks of that. And they have a degree of flexibility to move. Where they work. So I don't think it's in my context of my authorities or responsibility to do that. I have raised my concerns about it, but I will leave it up to the appropriate authorities to make some calls. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. And I'll just hand over to Paul for some comments as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Brown, I'm aware of a community village meeting that occurred maybe a month or two ago on a number of other matters in the Whakariwerua village where that question was raised. I don't know the outcome of that, so there might be an opportunity for council staff to reach across and just get a sense of what that might look like. But I know that they are absolutely thinking about the long-term future and those challenges of living in a natural environment as they are.
Thank you. We'll have Councillor Lee's question and then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from Councillor Brown's line of questions, you've mentioned an event that happened, well, we're dealing with an event that happened in September 25, another event happened in 2022. Is this the latest in a long series of events, or is this just these two events that are similar to this?
I think it's just the latest iteration of the evolving nature of the geothermal aquifer underneath that area. And if you go a little bit to your south of that, you've got the Puya, obviously, with the geysers. You do have, the effects of rainfall. You've got the effect of the aquifer magma, and below that. So this is an active geothermal area, and we need to be constantly alert and aware to the fact that it changes and moves, with climatic conditions too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sorry, my question was: has there been other events prior to July 2022?
There are ongoing interventions, some of them small scale, some of them larger, like this Tomo, and like the July 2022 incident, but there's ongoing interventions for subsidence, for corrosion, for things like that, which is consistent with that area.
Okay. Subsequent question. Section 77 of the Local Government Act requires staff to present to us all the reasonably practicable options. Is it a reasonably practicable option not to repair this section of road, or to take some other approach?
Well, a reasonable not to repair that will entail this council taking a road stopping decision. A road stopping decision that that means it denies public access to a particular area, and then you have to consult with the affected parties and the community. And at this point in time, we're not in a position to have any confidence at all that the village management will say, yeah, we concur with you not to have access to our village.
Thank you. I'll just get a comment from the CE too. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to be clear, this is we think this is quite a logical sequence. If there's a damage to any public road, the first question is, should we fix it or not? Because it exists as a public road. If this council makes a decision to not fix it, well, then we're into a other series of options, some of which Stavros has outlined. But the reason they're not covered in this paper is that normally we'd fix a public road. So if you decide not to, we'll go away and do some work on what the other options are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll also draw your attention to some of the risks that were highlighted around not doing it this way. Now we'll move on to, who have we got next? Councillor Kaifon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This question's probably more for David or the CE. What's the risk mitigation strategy, I suppose, because this is now unbudgeted for this financial year? We're close to the end of this financial year, but given that this probably won't be the only one, we've probably got another couple potentially coming. So how do we mitigate or deal with a unbudgeted capital expenditure? Do we delay something else? Do we reprioritise next year's spending? How do we...
Point of order, Mr Chair. We're not talking about anything that may or may not come to this committee at some stage in the future. We're dealing with the paper that has been presented with the recommendation this morning.
Still, the question is relevant around how do we deal with an unbudgeted item?
Yeah, I think we'll allow just to understand the context, because there will be other works coming. We know of one already. So I'll put the question, and if David, if you could provide an answer.
Through the Chair, perhaps if I answer more broadly in terms of our approach to unbudgeted expenditure in general. So this particular project is a capital project. If you recall through previous reports to Council for how we are tracking with our overall capital program, we are significantly underspent in our capital works, and our debt is lower than we had forecast in the annual plan, so there would not be a significant impact in the current year. However, we would approving any unbudgeted capital expenditure would increase Council's debt over time, and we would need to plan and factor that in for future annual plans and future long-term plans when we consider the program and consider the debt.
Thank you for the wider context. Yep. Is there anything you need to add? Thank you. Mayor Tapsell, did you have a question? No. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is hopefully a very easy question. Can you just confirm to me that the concrete slab is going to go from the red line to the red line on the map that was up there, and it's not just covering the actual taumā itself? That's a lot longer.
Yeah, we will try to stretch it, not quite to the red line, but if you look into the affected area, there is a side road, to them. That goes to the left there too. We've done a lot of the geotechnical assessments to find stable ground to support the slab onto that. So it's going to be about halfway through that red line.
Yep.
If I can also add to that, it's a really interesting question. Certainly, as Stavros said, we've done our best to find stable ground. Can I just say that's ground that's stable for now? There's no guarantees, and I think we've had plenty of discussion to highlight the point that this is a dynamic area. We're spanning across the immediate area, but I just want to be clear, and as it's outlined in the paper, certainly it's possible that other subsidence will change the situation in future.
Thank you. If there's no... Thank you, Councillor Wang. No further questions from anybody. I've actually had the Mayor signal she's happy to move the, and Councillor Wang has moved to second the motion, which is, thank you, Stavros, you're welcome to step away, thank you. 2, that the committee notes the circumstances and causal factors necessitating these remedial works. And 3, that the committee notes there is no further budgeted financial capacity in the roading activity to fund these works, and approves unbudgeted capital works to restore safe access to this public road. So, Mayor Tapsell's moved. I'll hand over to you for some comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm happy to support this. I think the sooner that we get this fixed, the better. But I am also very understanding of the high activity within that geothermal area. So as well as repairing it urgently, I am quite supportive because I see that as being stronger and more stable for what is a very busy tourism area, but also a road that services Te Pakira Marae as well, which is well used from local hapu, but also our wider community. So I acknowledge also that we have had a number of weather-related events. Unfortunately, this continues to put pressure on what had been planned works and requiring to at times have unbudgeted expenditure, but in this case it's a no-brainer because we do also have significant subsidy from New Zealand Transport Agency. Again, we can't guarantee that that financial assistance will always be available in future, so I'm very supportive of supporting this now and hope that the works can be completed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. A comment from Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with the advice presented that it's not reasonably practical not to repair it. So I will be supporting this. I just note for the benefit of the public, this is not going to put rates up noticeably. It will be added to our debt, the cost of this.
Thank you, Councillor. As a seconder, Councillor Wing, did you have any comments to make?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in support of Mayor Tapsell's comments there, it is disappointing that of the financial constraints, obviously, that we are already under and that this activity has. However, we do have a responsibility that this is a local road and we have a responsibility to our district, to our community, to maintain it and to provide that access to the residents in that community as well. But it's something that our district has always faced with these unexpected geothermal activity. So it is unfortunately one of the things that we have to deal with living in this beautiful place that we call home, but I'm very happy to be seconding this and again note the risks that were outlined of if we didn't do this, what that would what that would put that local community under as well. So happy to be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maxwell.
Madam Chair, and I support the motion there, and this is giving the CE delegated authority to approve the unbudgeted. And if my memory serves me right, I recall your first day working here at RLC, Rotorua Lakes Council, you were looking after a bit of a geothermal eruption in Ohanamutu roads. And I don't know whether that was sort of more than meeting my sister-in-law on the first day, but it was, and it highlighted that it can happen any time. We can't predict. Like, if we'd have known that this was going to happen, we mightn't have given the $1 million to Mini Road, wherever that is, out in the rural area, yeah. But wholeheartedly support. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We had several speakers for. Is there any against? If not, I will put this motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 9, which is a proposal to move into public excluded. The items to be considered in the public excluded would be 9.1, the confidential minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 18th of March. 9.2 is the capital delivery update on the recovered water project, and the reasons for passing this resolution would be the withholding of information is necessary to enable Council to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities. That's section 7.2H and also section 7.2I. Which is the withholding of information is necessary to enable Council to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to move into public excluded? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. We'll just give time for the live stream to be turned off. And